Welcome back to the program, Cowboy State Politics Live. It's Wednesday. I'm David Iverson, documented to be almost always right 99% of the time. That's true, my friends. I mean, the mainstream media, good luck. I really wish they would try to get a record like that, but we all know that it's impossible because they can't stop lying about the Freedom Caucus. I've got a piece sitting on my desk here that is... It's truly incredible, the lengths that they go to make up stories about conservatives. And, you know, I think that we've all seen it. You've probably gotten about, about a dozen text messages on your phone. And all of them are, tell us how terrible you think the Freedom Caucus is. Well, so I thought, instead of just talking about what these redcoats say about the Freedom Caucus, I thought we should talk to Mr. Andy Roth, who is the president of the State Freedom Caucus Network. Andy, welcome to the program, my friend.
Hey, thanks, David. Can you hear me all right?
Oh, yeah, man. Loud and clear.
All right.
All right. So let's quickly give you the treatment that everybody gets on my show. Well, why don't you take a few minutes and tell my audience about yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm born and raised in Kansas, and I came out of college from the University of Kansas, and I went to become a stock trader of all things. But I went to D.C. to get my master's degree in economics, and from there I fell into the sleazy business of politics, and I've been doing that for close to 23 years now. And 4 years ago, we launched the State Freedom Caucus Network, and the business model is pretty simple. We know and love the House Freedom Caucus in Washington, D.C., but why aren't there state freedom caucuses? We've got 50 swamps in the 50 state capitals, and there isn't a Freedom Caucus response to them. So 4 years ago, we launched a network, and the Georgia Freedom Caucus was our first one, and then South Carolina. We even went into Illinois and Maryland, two blue states. But I think it's 3 years now. We helped launch the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, and here we are. They're the first Freedom Caucus in the nation to basically fundamentally be in charge of the state house. And I couldn't be more thrilled with what they've done. And I think the trajectory for Wyoming is straight up. It's fantastic to see.
Well, I'm sure you know that Wyoming has not had a conservative legislature for, man, you know what? I'm a historian and I've looked into this a lot. I don't really think that we've ever had a conservative legislature. I mean, since statehood. And you can tell with the response from a lot of the liberals in the state, man, they're mad at you guys. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. So I guess the first question everybody is dying to know is, are you really the DC overlord that sends minute-by-minute text messages telling people how to vote?
No, and think of it this way. There are gun groups in Wyoming that support and oppose bills. There are life groups that support and oppose bills. Local government associations that support and oppose bills. We do the same thing. And what we do, though, is that we work with conservative lawmakers who believe in conservative ideas, and we just help them be better, help them be more effective. And let me back up a little bit, because I think it's important to understand the overall situation. Most people spend their attention on DC. You know, when they turn on their TV or open up their phone, the first thing they get hit with is what's going on with Trump, or what's going on with the war in Ukraine, or inflation and all that. The state capitals get very little attention. And that's exactly how the swamp likes it. They like operating in the dark. And so some very, very bad things are happening. We've got 7,500 state lawmakers in 50 state capitals spending our tax dollars, and there's very little attention on it. Now, think about this setup. The swamp, whether it's the governor, the bureaucrats, the lobbyists, or the leadership in the various state capitals, they have tons of resources. They have staffers, advisors, lawyers, press teams. They have all of these things, and they're all swimming in the same direction. But our conservative lawmakers, the ones that are fighting the hardest, have very little resources. You know, in a lot of states like Wyoming, their office is their desk on the chamber floor. And if they have any staff at all, it's usually given to them by leadership, which means they have an actual spy or a mole in their office. And so the people that we need the most to defend our liberties don't have the resources to match the swamp. And so what we do is we come in and we help conservative lawmakers and give them as much support as we can, whether it's human support, comm support, all sorts of things, so that they can be more effective. And let me make one last point. The red states are the worst because they have overwhelming Republican majorities. Democrats have figured out that the only way to get elected into office is to put an R after their name and call themselves a conservative. To your point, you say this all the time. These are the redcoats. These are the ones that say they're conservative, but then they go to Cheyenne or to the state capitol and they vote like liberals. And this problem exists in every red state. We see it everywhere. South Carolina, Alabama, Kentucky, Tennessee, Idaho, Montana, like it is everywhere. And it has been festering for years. And finally, we think we've cracked the code. We know how to solve this. And Wyoming is a beautiful example of this, is that if you give conservatives in the legislature, bring them together under a brand name that people know, the Freedom Caucus, and help them get organized, they now have the ability, more so than ever before, to fight the swamp.
Well, and since I started this program, I've said that the swamp in Wyoming may not be as wide, but it is every bit as deep. And I think that you hit the nail on the head, that it is your people. Like, you're far more likely to lose your liberty at the state level than you are at the national level. And most of it comes through interstate compacts. It comes through rampant spending on all sorts of different social programs. And, in Wyoming, like, our legislators don't have any staff unless they pay for it out of their pocket. And the people that are set up to help them, we call it the Legislative Service Office in Wyoming. It's obvious that those people are working against any sort of conservative idea. And, if you're a conservative legislator, like just before you came on the program, I did a campaign announcement for Mark Jennings. When he started, there might have been 4 conservatives in the House. And they started recruiting people and training them. Here's how you campaign, here's some public speaking training. And then it went from, a couple to 6 to 10 to 16. And then we had the big election where we took power. But that's what you have to do, because most people don't pay attention to what happens in their state capital. And that's really where they're sold down the river. Now, one of the bigger reasons I wanted to have you on the show is this big, gigantic whopper of a tale that came out over the weekend. I'm gonna read it to you. It was published in a newspaper, and I'll read it to you, and I'll just let you go off on it. So there's this senator from Ten Sleep. Ten Sleep is this little tiny town over the mountain. It's actually really pretty. But the senator's name is Ed Cooper. Here's what he told the Grable Standard. Quote, "The state's Freedom Caucus in D.C. has pledged $30,000 to each House race in Wyoming. The Freedom Caucus members are judged on how they vote on each of their agendas and the email that they get every day. The more you are in line with the voting, the better your campaign donation is. I'll just leave it there. No matter what they think is what they're told to do." Go for it.
Well, it's a complete lie. Somebody joked to me that Senator Cooper falls asleep in meetings
He does.
lot. And somebody joked that maybe he dreamt that up and thought that it was real, but it's a complete fabrication. There's no truth to it at all. It's that simple.
Well, and it's, I've talked a lot with, I know Jesse Rubino, your state director, pretty well. And, she'll laugh every time you bring this topic comes up. She's like, we don't get any money. The only thing we get money for is her salary. And that's it.
Yeah, I mean, it's that simple. I wish I could expound on it for 5 minutes about it, but that's really it. There's no truth to it at all.
Well, and I think it speaks to how scared the liberals are, the lengths that they're going to. I mean, the big issue here is this government, venture capital group called the Wyoming Business Council, which I'm sure you are aware.
Yep.
The Appropriations Committee decided to do away with that sucker, which, every story I hear about that, and there's pretty much one every single day, where it's spending taxpayer dollars on some sort of picking winners and losers enterprise that a couple of years later goes belly up. Well, really what it is, and this is just my opinion, but what it is their vote buying machine. They funnel money into a community, and then, that translates into votes. And when conservatives come into power and say, you know what, that's not government's place, well, that's when their head explodes.
Yeah, I'm always reminded of the Thomas Jefferson quote, the natural progress of things is for liberty to yield and for government to gain ground. And that's exactly what we see here, is that when the liberals are in charge, whether they have an R after their name or a D, their natural tendency is to grow government, because they know that's the way to stay elected and get reelected, is to keep handing out money. The thing that is most important that people should think about is there are all sorts of issues confronting lawmakers. Like I said before, guns, abortion, cultural issues. But at the end of the day, it's the budget that you have to keep your eye on, because the swamp needs to move money in order to pay off their special interests that support them. And the Wyoming Business Council is a perfect example of that. This is just a slush fund where bureaucrats get to take money, tax dollars, and hand it out to whoever they prefer to be the best. And that means that somebody's going to lose. And that's just simply not a core function of government. So let's get rid of it. And that's what the Wyoming Freedom Caucus is advocating for.
And the thing I like about, I like all of your legislators, the guys and gals that are in the Wyoming Freedom Caucus, but they are just constitutional conservatives that, if, and you can sit in the gallery, which I do, and just watch them, and bill will come up and you know exactly how they're going to vote, because most of the bills that come up are bigger government, they're more spending, and it's in ever increasingly creative ways that they try to spend people's money. All right. So last question for you, Andy. I know you're a much busier guy than I am. So why don't you tell me how the Freedom Caucus in Wyoming got hooked up with your group? I mean, where the way it's characterized in the media is you guys just control everything. But tell me the process about how that worked.
Yeah, that's a great question, and it's a perfect segue, because Chuck Gray, your great Secretary of State, is now running for Congress, and I hope he wins that race, because he's an absolute rock star. As I mentioned before, there are 7,500 state lawmakers all across the country, and Chuck is on the Mount Rushmore of one of the best state lawmakers that ever served in office. And so I've known him for longer than the Wyoming Freedom Caucus has been around, and he came and talked to me. I talked to John Baer, Rachel Rodriguez Williams, and others, and we just started having conversations. And they had a Wyoming Freedom Caucus, but they didn't have the support and the resources they needed in order to effectively fight. So we came along and said, you guys are conservatives, we're conservatives, let's work together. And that's exactly what we did at the beginning of 2022.
Well, and it's not, I mean, there's all sorts of groups that are kind of like yours. I mean, there's ALEC, and there's, the Chinese linked State Legislative Leadership Foundation. I mean, there's a whole litany of different groups that different legislators are a part of. But I think that the reason why you see the liberals' heads popping off is you guys are conservatives and the rest of them are not.
Yeah, and there's something important to be said here, which is what we're trying to do is just match the swamp's resources and intensity and have that be a conservative version. And so, yes, there are some outside groups out there, but they're not on the inside with the lawmakers. And so to be an effective Freedom Caucus, you need to have lawmakers come together, be organized, strategize, just like the swamp does. And then you need the outside groups to help rally behind you. If you're going to go charge up a hill, you need to look back behind you and make sure that, the rest of the troops are coming up to defend you when you go do battle. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is provide that inside-outside game where all conservatives come together and fight against the swamp collectively.
All right, Andy. Well, I got to run. If people want to get a hold of you, learn more about the Freedom Caucus, what do they do? Where do they go?
Yeah, they can go to statefreedomcaucus.org to find out about us. I'm on Twitter, or X, I guess, at Andy Roth. But more than anything, I think your listeners just need to find out more about the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. They're on X as well at WY Freedom Caucus. Follow them, find out who your state rep is. If they're in the Freedom Caucus, give them a high five. If they're not, ask them why, and see what they have to say. But definitely, for all the listeners, just help the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. And let me make one last point, because this is important. Wyoming is arguably the most conservative state in the union, just by voters. Yeah. But all we hear about in the news is Florida doing all this amazing stuff, and DeSantis, and how everybody loves what's happening in Florida. Wyoming should be right there, should be right up there, if not at the top. And I firmly believe that the only way that's going to happen is with the Wyoming Freedom Caucus continuing to do what they're doing, expanding their numbers, helping folks like Chuck Gray get elected to Congress. That is the key for Wyoming to be the shining city on the hill that everybody can look to and admire. And I think that's going to happen. It's just going to take some time, but we're already a long ways towards that goal.
All right, Andy, appreciate your time, my friend. You're welcome back on the show anytime you like. That was Andy Roth with the State Freedom Caucus Network. He's the president. And, it's the lies that are being told about the Wyoming Freedom Caucus just amaze me. That what Ed Cooper told the Grable Standard, it's not just his opinion. It's verging on slander. And had the Grable Standard not put what he said in quotations, it would be libel. Because it's the left in Wyoming will stop at nothing to defame the Wyoming Freedom Caucus. The number one culprit, before Ed Cooper, was Senator Ogden Driscoll. Every chance he gets, there's something nasty that he puts on Facebook. And the reason for it is, his way of thinking, the liberal way of thinking, the liberal policies, the Wyoming Business Council, all of the coffee cans that all of these legislators have set up, they're in peril because there are responsible people. And I know all of them in the House of Representatives. They're responsible people that are there to do the work of Wyoming.